Welcome to Maritime Pakistan, your gateway to the fascinating world of oceans and the incredible opportunities they present to every one of us. Our goal here is to explore the shared heritage of the seas and oceans to achieve global prosperity. So today, we're going to explore the book The Sea in History, the Ancient World, and we're going to focus in on the 13th chapter, which covers the development of maritime trade in the Egyptian world, way back in the late Bronze Age. We're going to travel back 3,300 years, and not to some simpler time, but to a world that was, believe it or not, surprisingly interconnected. And our biggest clue lies at the bottom of the Mediterranean. So, what can one little shipwreck from way back then tell us about a globalized economy that existed more than a millennium before the Roman Empire? Well, as it turns out, a whole lot. Our story really kicks off with this spectacular discovery off the coast of modern-day Turkey, the Uluburun shipwreck. Picture this. It's 1982, and a sponge diver just stumbles upon it. This isn't just a pile of old pottery. Oh no, it's an almost perfectly preserved moment in time, like a snapshot of international commerce from the 14th century BC. Now, this was no simple fishing boat. This was a heavy-duty cargo ship. I mean, just think about this. It was carrying a staggering 10 tons of copper and 1 ton of tin, the two essential ingredients for making bronze, which was the most important metal of the age. But it didn't stop there. It was also packed with ebony from Nubia, ivory, beautiful Canaanite jewelry, and even Mesopotamian seals. The cargo on this one ship represents at least 8 different cultures. This thing was a floating marketplace, a tiny version of an entire economic system. All of this incredible stuff on one ship makes you wonder, right? How was any of this even possible? Well, it all came down to logistics. You see, powerful empires like Egypt wanted resources they just didn't have at home. Things like timber for their monuments, silver for their treasuries, olive oil for, well, pretty much everything. And to get them, they had to trade. So let's break it down. When you compare traveling by land versus by sea back then, the choice was just obvious. A caravan of donkeys, maybe they'd cover 30 kilometers on a really good day. And that's if they didn't get hit by bandits. But a ship? It could sail over 200 kilometers in that same time. And crucially, it could carry massive amounts of stuff. You just can't strap 10 tons of copper onto a bunch of donkeys. The sea wasn't an obstacle. It was the superhighway of the Bronze Age. It connected everybody and made this whole system work. And the engine driving all of this incredible trade was technology. Early ships, you see, they were built without a keel, which made them way too unstable for the open sea. But then, around the 15th century BC, everything changed. Shipbuilders, probably Syrian or Canaanite, invented the keel. And that right there was a total game changer. It gave ships the stability to sail farther and more reliably. We can actually see this innovation in action in Queen Hatshepsut's huge expeditions and in Egyptian tomb paintings that show these advanced Syrian merchant ships docking right in the Nile. But this massive trade network wasn't some kind of ancient free-for-all. Nope. It was built on a very specific political foundation, a system where trade was about so much more than just economics. It was about power, it was about prestige, and it was about personal relationships. So check this out. This quote comes from something called the Amarna Letters, which were basically the diplomatic archives of the Egyptian pharaohs, all recorded on clay tablets. They show us that the most powerful rulers of the day, in Egypt, Babylon, the Hittite Empire, they didn't see each other as rivals. They called each other brother. So when the king of Babylon asks for gold, he's not just demanding something, he's reminding his brother, the pharaoh, of their family-like bond and their obligations to each other. And this whole system had a name, the Brotherhood of Kings. It sounds kind of formal, but really it was all built on this idea of friendship, and it governed all the major international trade. You didn't just buy silver from the Hittites. No, you sent a greeting gift to your brother, the Hittite king, who would then be expected to send a nice gift back. This whole language of gift-giving kept the peace, and, just as importantly, it kept all those precious goods flowing. What's so fascinating is that this system marked a huge shift in how these powers dealt with each other. In the 15th century BC, Egypt's approach was pure imperialism. Conquer, demand tribute, and take what you want. But by the 14th century, the model had totally changed to one of interdependence. The great powers were now focused on controlling key ports and making alliances through royal marriages and that whole elaborate system of gift-giving. It was a brand new way of doing things. So you had brute force being replaced by soft power. Diplomacy was now the name of the game, and it was the primary tool for economic policy. But what did that actually look like in the real world? And was this top-down, king-to-king system the only way goods were moving across the sea? Okay, so if we look at that first shipwreck, the Uluburun, through this new political lens, it suddenly all clicks into place. The cargo makes perfect sense. It's exactly what you'd expect from one of these royal gift exchanges. Huge amounts of raw materials for state workshops, plus all these high-status luxury goods, ebony, ivory, fancy jewelry, the perfect things for one king to send to another. This was almost certainly a state-sponsored mission. But then there's this other shipwreck from around the same time, Cape Caledonia, and it tells a totally different story. First off, it was a much smaller boat, and its cargo, it wasn't glamorous gifts for a king. It was scrap metal, broken tools, bits of bronze, all of it heading off to be melted down and recycled. This wasn't a diplomatic mission. This was just a practical supply and demand shipment, probably run by some independent entrepreneurial merchants. And this is where things get really interesting. It suggests a whole new kind of commerce was bubbling up, operating right alongside the big exchanges between kings. We even see little hints of it in those Armada letters. They mention royal messengers getting robbed, not of the king's official stuff, but of their own personal silver that they were clearly using to do a little business on the side. So what this really shows us is this incredibly complex, dynamic, and surprisingly modern economic system. You had the official, state-controlled trade, where diplomacy and friendship were basically the currency. And then, kind of operating in its shadow, you had this growing class of private merchants, running their own businesses, taking risks, and turning a profit based on pure supply and demand. But when you really step back and look at it, this ancient world, with its interdependent economies, its strategic trade routes, and this delicate balance between public and private business, it feels pretty familiar, doesn't it? It just proves that the fundamental challenges of global trade, that intricate dance between political power and economic incentives, they aren't new at all. They're as old as the very first ships that ever dared to cross the sea. We hope that you liked today's video. Please share your comments and subscribe to explore other similar opportunities. Post your questions in the comment section for future videos.